Another thing to remember, to head up the tape. The other voice inside of everyone's dialogue is life. At least one of the voices. I know last time we taped it I said enough for 5 or 27 mouthfuls. 2 or 3 of the things I want to hit and stretch out a bit. One about all systems that are more complex can more easily sustain and use all forms of resistance, all the way from inquiry, criticism, to actual assault. And I used some fairly straightforward examples, I thought, but you should be able to understand and see that out in life things are arranged so that the shoe department or shoe repair department inside of a Sears store with numerous employees coming and going, then there's even a hierarchy that if you came back to the same employee, he could say, well, so-and-so taught me how to do it. You'll have to see the manager of this department. Then you'll have to see the general manager of the Sears store, and etc. That they could handle, absorb, even use that kind of what from one view would appear to be resistance. That their purpose is to make money. To make money, you've got to provide a service and sell goods, and people have to return. You have to continue to do it day after day, week after week. That they could sustain that. In fact, some cases, which I still don't see no need to go into, but you can actually apparently go in the opposite direction. Of businesses fail and do better, but they got to be large. One guy can't fail in a business. You got to be real big. You know, Penn Central, you got to be that big and fail, and then make a profit. But if one guy on the railroad, you know, the Ziegfeld Railroad, and he goes broke, unless he has some senator in his absolute back pocket, nobody's going to bail him out. He is not going to turn a profit. The one guy running the shoe repair store, not only, what I wanted to be sure that you looked at properly yourself, not only might he go out of business, but he may, as it would appear to be, he may psychologically have to go into a distress sale and may go bankrupt just over the fact that he's always there and whatever resistance there is to his business. And it doesn't have to be just the example I used of people complaining about his work, is that they come in and let's say they complain about the prices. They come in and they say, I was here before when you opened and you did a pretty good job and I'd like for you to work on these other shoes for my wife, but I was in Sears and I just happened to notice they do the same kind of work for $1 less a shoe than you do. Now, he can try to explain it, well, I can't match Sears and blah, 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 and how buying things in quantity and all sorts of stuff. You must simply see that what I noted for you is a fact, whether it's noticed out in life much is no great consequence, but at the most mundane, routine, material level, it is a fact that the more complex a system is, the better it can sustain all kinds of, and plug in anything you come up with, they all seem to be some sort of negative resistance. You can call it stress, you can call it anonymous input, you can call it erroneous input, that is, that the guy opened his business to make a profit, and to make a profit you got to make people happy, and what he seems to do is make people mad. That's what I mean by erroneous input. It is not what he expected. He performs some service, sells some goods, and he does not get the full report. The dance is not fully what he expected. Somebody may pay him, but then they come back and say, my shoes fell apart. And I found out I could have got it cheaper. The kind of stress on a system that is more simplistic than an equal or a similar kind of system is more complex. The more complex one will thrive. Notice, governments do not go out of business. Now they can be overthrown. Now Sears could be taken over by something bigger, Federated Departments, or I don't know who's bigger than Sears, but Walmart could be taken over by Kmart, or Kmart could be taken over by Sears. But notice when it gets so big, it doesn't matter what happens. Governments can get overthrown, but governments do not go out of business. I know of no religion that has ever gone out of business. They get big enough there's a slightly different aspect to religion than government. It's not as unusual or different as you might think. But if they get big enough, they can absorb anything. There is no way that you can give a death, not you as an individual, a death-defying, a death-rendering blow to the body politic. You cannot be done. Now, that should bring us up to date from 48 hours ago. Now let me point out, this is true with the life of life, with the body of life. There is a particular way that you can see a kind of ad hoc response to this so-called eternal question about what is the purpose of human life, what is the purpose of man. Life has concocted a more complex system within itself, and that system is man. Look, forget about any dreams about what you can't see. Look at everything you can see in your senses, and look at everything that you can see in your senses second-handedly, such as reading about astronomy, looking at pictures of the universe, reading about the subatomic world. Everything that you know, look at it and see what is the most complex systems man has recognized yet. It's himself. Nothing matches it. Now, he certainly cannot work himself up into the kind of fury that a star can, and he certainly cannot make himself, no matter how often he goes to a gym, he can never make himself as strong as a gorilla and all that. When you get down to the visceral level, there are things that in that sense we can say that he cannot become more complex. He cannot turn out the kind of heat that a star can. He cannot get as strong as an elephant, etc. But looking at a system, all the way from a star to an elephant, to a gorilla, there is nothing as complex as man. From certain views, there's nothing as complex as even parts of man, such as the brain, that nothing comes close to that. But just take man, the system. Now, life has within itself a system that is so complex that it can absorb everything thus far that has ever happened. Humanity, the race of man, has never been put out of business. At least you were impressed and you laughed when me pointing out governments do not get out of business. Religions do not. In fact, businesses, even big enough, do not. Man has not. Never. Man has sustained every affliction, if not directly known. People keep supposing, they theorize that humanity, even prehistory, has survived things probably unimaginable. It survived every known virus, everything that's been identified to attack man, all catastrophes, and especially, as humanity likes to point out, our stupidity. Survived it all and thrived. It's gotten bigger. You do know that. It's not just General Motors that's increased in size. It's not just the bureaucracy. If you're going to look at humanity as a government or as a business, it is a lot bigger than it was 50 years ago. A lot bigger. More stockholders, more employees, more activities. Diversified, nothing matches it. I mean, if you think that some of these conglomerates that keep engaging in these takeovers, that ends up that a tobacco company ends up owning magazines, ends up owning somewhere down the line no smoking clinics. If you think that is wide diversification, think about this. All of that is contained within the system of man. There's nothing that you can perceive, a scientist, a dreamer, a nightmarer. Nobody can perceive, nobody can even imagine anything more complex than man. They do not, of course, I'll admit, go around thinking about it in this manner. But now I present it to you, and all you should be able to do is think for 1 second and go, yeah, that's true. There's anything that you think of that is more complex than man, man invented it. So there is nothing, there is no painting, there is no piece of art that is smarter, or as they might say in the city, that's more conscious, that is more meaningful than the artist. So there's nothing that you can think of as complex, I don't care what it is. The sciences, the social sciences, any theory as to, look at a theory as being something real. A scientific theory as to the origin of the universe that you might think, well, now that's complex. To think about the actual evolution of humanity from just certain plasmas being heated up, and us coming just from some kind of primordial soup, and finally turning into us, Einsteins, Michelangelos, soupy sales. What kind of great evolutionary complex forces at work? That's nothing. That's all contained in you, no matter who you are. You could be soupy sales, and that whole thing is in you. You can go, huh, to that. You can go, huh, and kick up your heels at the history of man, at the history of the universe, because you are it. Now, since life has done that, would anyone consider that it might be apropos that you do no less to yourself? That you, in a sense, can create a more complex system. You create your own man system within your own intellect. Just a thought that just kind of struck me as I was standing here. I don't guess it has anything at all to do with this kind of stuff. Look at the simplicity of other systems. And I mean systems about as wide as you can take it. Organizations, organisms, creatures, ideas, beliefs. They're all a system of some sort, all right? All right. Nobody's wanted to do that. All right? Or, okay. All right? Okay. All right. If you look at all systems, okay. All right, all systems. If you look at all systems, okay. All right, all systems, that everything is some sort of system. Then if you'll look around, everything besides man is so simple that it is in danger of severe assault. It is always in constant danger of being rendered, even at least temporarily, inoperable. Think about it. You still need examples? How about this? It strikes me somebody's intelligence, if I was going to speak for ordinary, might say, wait, there's got to be something more complex than man. How about the environment in which man lives? That's got to be more complex. You're wrong. The environment apparently, look at it, the environment apparently is so simple that we can destroy it. If we can destroy it, then you're talking about Michelangelo being able to go back in to the Sistine Chapel and saying, you know, that last check the Pope gave me bounced. And in the middle of the night, go up there and repaint it over. That's what an artist, that's what the more complex can do to the more simplistic. I picked out the environment because I thought that might strike you as fairly complex for a second. But look around you, besides man, every other system. The environment, look at the full ecological chain. Look at that, look at any idea, look at any philosophy, look at any other creature, look at any other organization, any institution, and every one of them are either so simple that at one time they have been rendered, at least temporarily, inoperative, or there is this knowledge in man that they could be. Why else are men so concerned about their morality? Why are men so concerned about their ideas that we can't be blasphemous once we found the God? You know, me and my buddies, me and this state over here, we got together and we got our own God. You know, Fred. Now, one of the first things that Fred told our great founder is, don't laugh at Fred. You know, honor Fred. Think about it. Well, what's the first commandment to two of the great religions in the world? The Ten Commandments. I think it's the first one about, you know, don't blaspheme God. Honor God. Why? It is so simple. The idea of God is more simplistic than man is, and therefore it is always in danger that somebody's going to drop it and break it, or at least mortally wound it. So watch it. You got to watch what you know. You can laugh at some things, like somebody else's religion and somebody else's God, but don't laugh at this one. And then it comes out in theological arguments, of course, going nowhere, but it gets on the Great Mineral Express, that they almost can justify in some way that you shouldn't laugh at God. I mean the real God, that is our God. But I'm pointing out to you, forget ideas of religion, spirituality. There is a molecular basis for this, as everything else. That which is more simplistic can be rendered inoperative, if not destroyed, by that which is more complex. There is the reason that humans are made to say to one another and themselves, there's some things a man shouldn't say, some things a man shouldn't laugh at. There is such a thing as blasphemy. This is the same kind of example I was talking about the environment. The belief that man is surrounded. You cannot find exception to this. I'm not going into any more examples, I don't think, unless I think of one that really makes me laugh. Look around you. Anything that exists, anything that you imagine, you or anybody else, it exists, even if you've never seen it, if you can imagine it, it exists. Take anything except man. Just subtract man from the consideration for a second. Anything else, think about it. Anything else you and everybody else in some way believes, if you take it as being important, you personally, which is the only thing we're talking about, if you take it as having some meaning in life, then notice there is built in to your acceptance of it having some meaning, there's also built in the feeling that this can be broken. It can be hurt. It can be damaged. This thing can be put out of business. You know why? Because it is more simplistic than man is. Aren't you glad that has no significance to your own present nervous system? God, sometimes I think I'm going crazy. Really? Sometimes I believe I may be crazy. No shit. Wait a minute. No, anything but new information. No, anything but that. No, wait. That's too much. Let me think about it. How can a person do less, attempt to do less to themselves than life has done for itself? Life has built in, it has in its own body an exon, an ultimate bureaucracy, a General Motors to end all General Motors. Man, vis-a-vis everything else, that man is so complex. Dinosaurs can fall, religions can almost get stamped out, identifiable nations can almost be destroyed, whole systems of righteous beliefs, whole ideas of what is true scientifically can go by the wayside theoretically, and yet what survives it all? Plagues, earthquakes, bad news, zits, dandruff, psoriasis. What survives it all and keeps getting bigger and bigger? Nothing gets bigger than man. Nothing else is growing. Well, forget the universe for a second, because you start talking about the life of life itself. Nothing else is growing like man. You can say, wait a minute. Surely there's some kind of statistic somewhere. I hate to start wallowing in the mud, but there must be statistics somewhere that says that the economy of Japan, the debt of Brazil, that something is growing faster than man. Wrong! It can't. Because the only reason it's growing, in either a positive or negative sense, is that men are there growing. Getting bigger, fatter, and richer, or thinner and poorer, and more in debt. It doesn't matter. But you are surrounded. Anything else, if you take man out of consideration, anything else man fear can be hurt. It's like a one-man operation. The belief in your religion, the belief in your nationalism, your race, your background, all the little hobbies of being a professional veteran, being a professional Jew, being a professional Catholic, being a professional Italian, all of that stuff is right outside the realm of the nervous system. It is the kind of thing that apparently gives some kind of external stability, and yet all of it is seen as being what? This is not the word necessarily used, but it's seen as being delicate. That is, you call a man by some kind of slang name, picking on his religion or his race, and in many parts of the world there is some judicial leeway given for fighting words. Like, well, if you call that man that kind of racial slur, or you attacked his religion like that, or you talked about his mama like that, you know, we're not... There is some legal defense. Well, we're not surprised the man cut you. Think about it. What kind of person is it that has got to have the judicial, or at least the personal belief, that I have leeway to defend it if somebody attacks my good name? Why? Because it is more simplistic than man is. That was a little thing I threw in 48 hours ago. There's no real word for this, and I kind of did it to you tongue-in-cheek. And I said it's rather sad that the whole world is filled with people that apparently will die. At least they will fight to say, I'm an Italian, I'm a communist, I'm an American, I'm a Muslim. And I just said it's sort of sad, not the word, but sort of sad that you don't see any widespread, not even parading, but just somebody here and there noting that, by God, you know, it's good to be human. That never strikes anybody. I mean, if somebody said that, then you'd wait for the other shoe, like the rest of the sentence. It's good to be a human. You know, you don't hear the rest. You know, the profession, the race, the religion, something, the hobby of you being you. I was suggesting, again, apparently with my tongue in the cheek, a little earlier, that this kind of activity, the kind of interest that brings people into such as this, and makes them look for something like this, I was suggesting to you, is the attempt, the need to make yourself more complex, to build up what would be equal inside of you, is a system of man in your own nervous system. Because look at it now. Look how delicate, look how, which is synonymous with simplistic, what seems to be you is now. I mean, it's an accepted fact. In the most sophisticated, educated part of the world, it's an accepted fact of how literally fragile is a human personality that stresses your partner dying, your father dying, the loss of your job, your company making you move across the country, can wreak havoc with people's personalities. I mean, so bad that they'll end up on the Oprah Winfrey Show. Amen. It's an accepted fact that the human nervous system, as it is manifested at the ordinary level, is delicate. And I'm telling you why it is delicate. Because it is simplistic. Withal, before I push on to the next paragraph, if such things as the religious systems, if somebody could actually live any of them, you do realize that they would be, let me at least give them credit for this, you would be a non-simplistic person. You do understand that? All right, you would be a complex person if you could live out any religion. Just close your eyes and pick out one out of a hat. If you don't like religion, just take one of the better known, if we could couch it down, put it into some outline, which we could do. Don't ask me to do it. But, you know, take somebody, just a general area of philosophy, from Plato, Aristotle, almost anybody, Burke, Bacon, and just some idea that you would read if you could take thousands of pages down to some general outline and make 10 commandments from Sartre or somebody. There would be something that if you read it, you'd go, yeah, that'd be an exceptional person. That'd be somebody who could really wheel and deal with life. They'd be more humane. They'd be more intelligent. They'd be more compassionate. They wouldn't be thrown about by all the little vicissitudes of life. So I could say, all right, there they are, different philosophies. Pick out one. And you picked it out. And if you could do that, you would be complex. And it doesn't matter what it is, but you would be complex if you could actually live and absorb some of and became part of your nervous system, the information that life continually has floating about that is too complex. And of course, only the too simple are drawn to it, which is the way it's supposed to be. I still got a handful of things I talked about that I want to try to pull together while I still stretch them apart. How about having to do with the simple? Regarding R.E. the simple, colon, hints, trivia, and a definition. All right, first, hint regarding the simple. If you are too convinced, you are too simple. I'll wait a second. Of course, I'm glad that we're not surrounded by the kind of simple nervous systems that would say, too convinced about what? At least I'm glad I am not surrounded. Oh, all right, I'll answer it anyway. Anything. What else is a simple idea? What else is a simple system? But now look, you cannot talk about some three-dimensional level to where this is wrong, or where this is actually an anomaly within the larger system of life. The more simple a system is, the more it must be convinced. How else could one guy try to open up a little shoe store down the street knowing that the resources of Sears, last time I had reason to read, it's the largest retailer in the world still. If Sears wanted to put him out of business, notwithstanding the fact that there are certain kinds of laws on the books that if you can prove it, you could interfere, so never mind all that legal shit stuff. How could a guy decide to take his life savings, put his family's future in jeopardy, knowing that around the corner is a Sears store taking up the anchor spot at the end of this huge mall? They got their own shoe department, repair department, and if they cared to, they can just put him out of business almost any time they want to. They can just put up signs, shoe repairs, 3/4 off anybody else's cost, plus a new Dodge Daytona for every third customer. Because you can't really do that, I know. There are certain there's certain laws, but the thing is, the man has got to understand, you would think, that this is, to go in competition with Sears, we're talking about trying to push a tractor trailer up a hill with a rope. For me to be in competition. Now that would be one fairly rational view. So you'd have to say, all right, we could then start talking about the dreams of entrepreneurship and all that crap. It's this. The man's got to be convinced. All right? How else would a man go out and say, my God sent me over here in front of you infidels, and he said that me alone, with this piece of rope, could take on and defeat the rest of you. And 5,000 people come out with little teeny knives and they all stab him at once. The man had to be convinced to go out there and get stabbed with 5,000 little teeny knives, right? He had to be convinced. Don't talk to me about, faith in gods and all that. If you are too convinced, if you believe that now or somewhere in the future, but right now is the only thing that matters, that right now there is some external to your ordinary intelligence, that there is some external permanent truth that you are convinced of, regardless of the way I may have apparently flim-flammed your brain here and there and played Denver omelet with it, that still somewhere deep down you are totally convinced that da-da-da-da-da-da is true. You knew that before you ever saw me, and you still know it in the midst of this kind of cycloramic verbal intrigue, that somewhere down in there in the middle there's still this one thing of which you are convinced. I'll repeat my hint again. There are no conditions. If there were, I'd put an asterisk, I'd put a footnote to this. If you are too convinced, you are too simple. That was the hint. The second one was going to be trivia. A little fact. For someone attempting to do this, that's who we're talking to, here's the fact. A little piece of trivia in case it comes up in your game sometime. For somebody like you, the past is far too simple. Far, may I repeat that? Far too simple. Well, yes, I could elaborate a bit. Two immediate modes verbally I might hum to you. The past is far too simple for two reasons I'll mention right now. For one, it's dead. But the other reason is you can make it be anything you want it to be. That's far too simple. I might also put a hint. I said it was just going to be, no, I said it was going to be a hint, trivia, and a definition. All right, a sub-hint. This is sort of connected, I think, to the hint. It just kind of struck me there. If something's dead, you can be real convinced. If there was some agreement of a group of people go up and say, this thing's dead. It could be a creature, an idea, a piece of history. And you and some other people, but to you meaningfully, and there seems to be some support, that this thing's dead. Now that's simple. That's far too simple. Because it can apparently be identified and stay identified. Now as you go off and come back, and yep, it's still a blank. It's still a dead whatever it is. You can leave maybe for 2 or 3 years, maybe longer, and come back. Yep, that's far too simple. The other aspect of the past being far too simple is the ordinary nervous system, up to the thinking part, can make the past be anything it wants it to be. That's far too simple. Far too simple. In the matter of the simple, part 3, a definition. Everybody seems to always enjoy this one. Well, all of life enjoys this word. Evil. I've given other views of it. I'll tell you another one though, in regards to this matter. That which is evil is that which is presently too simple for long-term growth. That's what evil is. This does not deny the other one I told you before, that evil is being dominated when and where and by whom you were not immediately prepared to be submissive, in a case in which you weren't prepared to be submissive. Or suddenly somebody makes you dance. That's always evil. But in the matter of that which is too simple and that which is too complex, a real operational complex definition, just an ad hoc definition of that which is evil. You can look through history from any view you want to, religiously, socially, psychologically, individually, morally. That which anybody labels as evil, that is, the currency takes off. It's not just one guy somewhere hollers, I think evil is a sweet pickle. And that sound goes out in the universe and it's never heard from again. I'm talking about evil that some group of people go, hey, that information takes flight and has some life to it. There is a quite valid way to look at it, and you'll always see that which they were condemning as evil. Well, it's always been called evil, theft of property. As long as you've got the history of man, you have got them condemning and saying it's evil to take someone else's property. The food that they killed or found, they just take it from them. To take their property, to take their land, to take their, like they used to consider, I always like that, women as property. If somebody come and take your woman without paying for her, or at least giving you a post-dated check. But it's always been referred to as evil. Just pick out one example. Look down the 10 Commandments or any other commandments. There is a quite valid way, if you look at it, the act or the idea involved. Sometimes it's an idea like don't curse God. But the act of such as requisitioning by force by stealth somebody else's property is too simple. Come on, somebody must hear that. What would happen? Just look at the most basic material aspect of three-dimensional life of man. If everyone started simply, forget morality of any kind, you people out there on tape. Of course, you may have forgotten morality and ended up here anyway, but never mind. Forget any idea of morality. If everyone now simply attempted to take property, whenever you're hungry, instead of you having to work or trying to work, trying to go out and find your own food, you just turn around, the first food you saw, you grabbed it. And then you laid it down for a second to grab somebody's woman, and somebody grabbed your food. You went after them, somebody grabbed your woman. And you went chasing them, and you came back, and somebody had taken the place where you were standing. That is, where you lived, now somebody else was living there. If that went on, just take life as it seems to have been operating up until now, you do see that there would be some sort of energy transfers. There would be some sort of dynamic lost. That kind of operation of the moving around of property, the moving around of energy, is too simple. I'm not going much further with this verbally. You should be able to feel what I'm saying. That is the basis, from this particular view tonight, of what evil is. That the act involved, the thought, the apparent feeling involved is too simplistic presently. It can change, but it is presently too simplistic for long-term growth and health of life itself, of humanity, of civilization, of individuals. It's all the same thing. Too simplistic. That is the basis of every form of evil noted at any time in the history of man, in any place, under whatever guise. The acts being labeled as evil, or the ideas, are too simplistic for the time and the place. That's what I mean by presently. I'm saying it now that you can look back in history, but right now, anything, and it's still considered evil to forcibly take someone's property, especially to take their life or to take their health. That is, to assault them has always been called. As long as you've got history recorded, it has been called evil. Whether it's called religious evil or simply moral evil, or some kind of evil per se, that just within itself it's evil. If you don't believe it's evil because the God said so. It is still that the act involved is too simplistic to sustain, to promote any long-term growth of any system involved. Another something that I was mentioning last time we were taping, that as life grows triaxially, as life grows non-linearly, it is continuing to feed out information that is too simple to the complex. From other views, this can run coevally. It's sending out information that is too complex to the simple. But besides the examples and the ways that I was pointing toward 48 hours ago, it also, let me take one of the examples I even pulled out to show you how tricky, how complex life is. That a same example that I pointed out that could be seen as that which was too complex for the simple, that is, that attempted campaign to combat the so-called drug problem in our country, our part of the life's body, just say no. And by the time that made the headlines, that this famous person with a political forum said, here's the way we should fight it. Instead of worrying about spending billions of dollars and lining our coastlines shoulder to shoulder with people with little teeny knives or big old guns, trying to deal with foreign countries and to stamp out the growing of the cocoa plant, forget all that. When you're offered drugs, and you're about to be drawn in, or here's a potential to fall into the trap of drug addiction, forget all this other stuff. Just say no. And the reporters wrote it down. It made the news, and almost by the time it made the news, life had another part of its body begin to laugh that off the stage. Now I don't mean just drug addicts out in the ghettos. You started having people come on with medical, psychiatric credentials saying this kind of simplistic attitude, this kind of simplistic sloganeering by famous people is doing us no good. The problem is far too complex. All right. You can look at that as being a message, an idea, a piece of information, which is energy, that was too complex for the simple. That is, the kind of people who are, as they call it in psychology nowadays, in psychiatry, of an addictive potential personality. That those people, it does no good. The idea is too complex to tell someone, or especially to tell someone who's already addicted to cocaine. All right? Okay? All right. It is too simplistic to tell them just say no, because now they're already addicted. But you can look at it this way. The information is also, this energy is too complex to tell somebody already addicted. Because they're so simple, they're addicted. They got to have cocaine. They got to have another fix in a little while, or they're going to go bonkers. Probably go out and hurt somebody, or try to. So it's information coming out that is too complex to the simple and too simple to the complex. And the same thing can be vice versa. All right? Okay. But now, I wanted to show you, to try to enrich your systems, I'm going to use the same example. Now we're going into a third possibility. You notice the modes I've drawn out, that kind of matrix, if you're following some of this, is one of it is info that is too simple for the complex, all right? Okay. Then information that is too complex for the simple, right? The example, but that doesn't cover it, believe it or not, that it can be both ways there. There's another one. It's too simple for the simple. To tell somebody already addicted to cocaine. Now from one view, their system is very simple. They could have a master's degree, they could have an MBA. In some way they have fallen into the clutches of demon cocaine. Now their whole life is down to a quite simple level, all right? How can I get some cocaine right now? Where is the next vial of crack coming from, or whatever method they use? They're down to a very simple system. All they want, their system now, is transferring the energy out of cocaine. Their brain, their nervous system chemically wants what is in cocaine. They're, in fact, raison d'etre almost for being alive now is to process cocaine. Simple. They got life down to a manageable level in a sense. But that's all they want. They don't care about clothes. They don't care about fashion. They don't care, believe it or not, that they may take designing women off TV next year. They're not worried about any of these important matters, or that the Democrats might get back in. One thing, cocaine. So they got a simple life. This message is now too simple for the simple. Just say no. They ain't got time to laugh at that. We got to turn the tape over just a second. The missing southeast corner of my little matrix. If we were being linearly reasonable, it would be what? The too complex for the too complex, right? All right, I can do that, but there's really, you would think at the city level that any matrix, you can start off and I could have left it where I did 48 hours ago with that the info is either too simple for the complex or too complex for the simple. But if I'm going to add to it, you knew, without even thinking about it, but once I point, you knew, well, it's going to double. There's really another one. You want me to just add it on, which will ruin the symmetry of the city? Or do you want me to probably do a better way, is just encompass it? This one is what it is the info is too complex for everybody. But it can be seen. I was trying to sketch it out last time we were taping, the ideas such as that humans keep believing that the way to live, or the secret, the piece of information everybody should hold dear and live by is treat your fellow man as yourself. Now I pointed out that that was too complex for the simple, but it's also too simple for the complex. Now I just threw it out, gave you one corner of the matrix. You take sophisticated people nowadays, people who've been around the block, they may not deny that there must be some validity, if not in a religious, even in the humanistic sense of treat your fellow man as you would want to be treated. If you in some way took an average sophisticated person nowadays and you entice them to come to some kind of forum, some kind of lecture that you're going to reveal some kind of new information to help where there could be a benefit, and it turned out the piece of information was a reiteration of this. You could try to doctor it up and paint it a different color, but it comes out and the crowd hears, well, what you're saying is treat your fellow man as yourself. I could twist the sense around, but they would hear, that's what you're saying. And they perhaps would not stand up, no one in the audience stand up and holler, that's a lot of phooey. It's simply that it's too simple. It's not that the idea is erroneous necessarily, but it is too simple for the complex. But it's also too complex for the simple. But the all-inclusive is this, when it gets to whatever this kind of thing is dealing with, the real information, the information around the corner of all of this, that which seems to be too simple, that which seems to be too complex. It's all too complex for everybody. That's why it comes out either seeming to people here and somebody there, either seeming as though this is too complex or this is too simple. That's why. Because it's all too complex. I don't want to leave this one area with anybody. I don't want to leave with any possibility that you might go away from here and think, well, wait a minute, that means that anything I already know is not worth the cells that they're written on. Don't want you to leave with that kind of erroneous, simplistic information or an idea. Another piece of something before we run out tonight that I wanted to expand on a little bit. I mentioned rituals, and I was talking so much the last taping, throwing in so much that I only hit one aspect of that. But rituals, there's a lot more of the movement of life behind what causes men to involve themselves in rituals than the actual physical manifestation of lighting candles or whirling around and dancing and chanting or whatever it is, or having to put on your same left shoe every morning and sit at the same position on your bed. There's much more to it than that. But people are made to say many fine, striking things about rituals. And I've heard it referred to all kinds of things. I've heard rituals referred to as myths in action, knowledge of the gods personified or put in practice. And I could take all that if I didn't have anything else to do, and I could lecture on that to some group of people, and yes, that's exactly what rituals are. It is some kind of human attempt to take non-human, superhuman, transcendental ideas, realities, and in some way put them into a kind of physical, three-dimensional, sensual practice. It's all right. I'm going to tell you what they are, though, from a more complex view. And it's not an attack on rituals. But what it is uncertainty, it's fear, it's ignorance in motion. That does not deny that in the city someone can say rituals are man's myths in action. Rituals are the knowledge of the gods put in sensual or put in practice. That's all true in the city. But I'm telling you what it is when you get around the corner. A more complex view, to put it in words, is that all rituals are uncertainties, and I'm covering it all, fears and ignorance. And I think that about covers everything I meant to cover. Inaction. But look at the power. And I wanted to specifically point out that which I didn't get into this area the last time. Remember the nervous system loop that I had drawn out? I really didn't talk much about that, but I cut it up into, very crudely, what seems to be man's physical life on just a visceral level of the body, if it was just operating just by itself in a coma. Or if we could disconnect your nervous system somewhere hitting at the top of the spine and you could still motivate and move around. That's this. And then up in what seems to be the emotions, the limbic system, up into the brain, and then the cerebral cortex. Let me tell you, chemically, electrically, the basis of rituals, one view, is the system of man has been driven to take that which is quite healthy at lower levels, at the visceral level. That is, it's taken routine and habit and is now pulled it into the area. As in everything, can you follow this right quick? There are loops within loops. There's a feedback loop. This is not literally true, but that would seem to bypass this level, but I could draw it between the other aspects. This gets to be, this is the basis. I didn't mean to make it more confusing. This is the basis that I was using the time-honored example of neurologically, is they cannot say if you are running because you're frightened or if you're frightened because you're running. It is closed loops within the loops that two systems seem to be talking. The limbic system is frightened and it is talking here, the best they can talk, just to the visceral level. Or you could look at it that it's already up here and the emotions are talking to the brain. But you can't say which started first. Now, back to what I was saying, what ritual, one of the ad hoc views that I'm bringing up for a specific reason, it's tied to what I've been talking about tonight and last time. The system of man has taken that which at a lower level, a physical level, if we're going to talk about it for a second, just arbitrarily cut off from everything else. It has taken the kind of simplicity, the kind of routine, the kind of habit that is healthy. It is normal. It is just, you can look at it as being de rigueur for a good healthy life is habit. Eat food that is good for you. Eat food that agrees with you. Sleep as much as you need to sleep. If you need to sleep the same amount every night, sleep the same amount of night. That is the basis at the visceral level. Ritual is taking that reality, bringing it up to the level wherein habit, if you're attempting to do something further in your life, wherein habit, that kind of ritualized routine, has no place. It is too simplistic. Now even life knows this because rituals change from generation to generation. They're not handed down directly. I know that some seem to be. But in one person's life, there's ordinarily no escape from that. If there was, all religions would only last one generation. All political ideas would only be good for 20 years. All economic theories. In the area of ritual, the human system, the man system, has taken up that which would be healthy, commendable, every day, that is habit, ritualistic behavior at the lower level, and has now thrown it into the ill-prepared hopper of the limbic cortex loop. And it is not yet, individually, it is not yet prepared for that. Now it accommodates itself, but insofar as an individual thinking, being driven to seek some real new information, this is not it. It is comfort, because it is ignorance put in motion. It is uncertainty apparently wrestled to the ground to the point that as long as you're lighting the candles, as long as you are praying or making some symbols or reading some holy book or trying to repeat over and over and over. Siegfried loves me, Siegfried loves me, Siegfried loves me. I'm a Muslim, I'm a Muslim. Playing with prayer beads. Whatever it is, it seems as though there is a kind of stability because you have a kind of petite mort. You have a kind of dead past right then. As long as you are there and you're praying or going where the routine is, it's almost as though you've got a little small death there. That is, you've got the past, which is simplistic and manageable, that it just seems to have an effect. That, yes, here I am, doing my head up and down on the wall or on the floor, and I'm facing east or west, and I'm chanting, and I've been eating a certain thing, but it doesn't seem silly. I mean, it can't be silly. You're surrounded by other people doing it. Your father did it. Your grandfather did it. Millions of people right that second are doing it. Of course, I told you the truth. It's silly. I mean, it's not my business, but it's silly. And of course, if I was actually telling other people this, I'd be silly to tell them that. And I'd be just as silly as they are. The world is full of those kind of examples, or even other examples of life offering up that which is actually too simplistic for the need. But it is all right. Life is all right. Life is thriving through this because it shifts itself from generation to generation. It's my three-legged stool, and things flow from the irrelevant, not directly from one leg to another, but that which seems to be irrelevant slowly drifts into that which was resistance. Somebody drifts into that, feeds into that which originally, or last generation, or yesterday, seemed to be that which was meaningful, that seemed to be the plan of a group or a person, and it all gradually shifts. If you looked at that three-legged stool, I'm using this, of course, in quotation marks, it's like a drunken progression. That it rocks back and forth, and it goes this way, and it goes that way, and yet it goes. It don't ever fall down. It don't ever get arrested. And inside, it's like we're all, the ordinary intelligence that's being shaken around. And you're always afraid this thing is so delicate. We're going to destroy the universe. We're going to destroy our environment. We're going to kill each other off. We're going to kill off life itself. Because up here, it's like maybe things do seem a little strange. But I'm telling you, that thing does not get picked up for drunk driving. There is nobody to arrest it. There is nobody to tell it it's drunk. And it's moving. But within that, then comes this information that in one generation, in one intellectual lifetime, i.e. yours, in that one lifetime, the information that seems to be in some way related to this kind of hunger, this kind of desire to have more complex information, all you're given is that which is too simplistic. That was what I was trying to drag out. It's a quite acceptable hobby. It serves life's purposes. It feeds and transfers energy, but you should be able to see the anomaly, a four-dimensional, a five-dimensional anomaly of a sophisticated person, a more complex person at the ordinary level going to a more simplistic person, a naive savage somewhere, and seeking instruction on how to be more complex. So to do this, I'll go find somebody that's almost illiterate, living in a cave somewhere, and they're all around the world. They always have been. It's not some kind of new phenomenon. The hippies didn't discover it in the 60s, or people are not doing it just now. They've always been doing that. Always. If they weren't going to exotic places, before there was American Express and ways to travel around on the Canard Line, even in their own little parts of jungles, you can read back. But the Greeks, they were sophisticated for their day and age. The leaders, the Caesars in the Rome, they would get carried away that they want to become more than what they are, and what would happen? They'd go find out there's some guy that seems to have epilepsy or some kind of fits. I'm not picking on epileptics, so don't write me if you're Presbyterian and epileptic. Be sure don't write me. But it's known, there's some poor guy, there's some farmer out somewhere, there's some guy living up in a cave that has one eye, can hardly talk, and he has fits. And suddenly you have a Caesar, or you have a guy who believes that the gods have told him that you will be the one to bring new information to your people. And he thinks, well, there's one piece of information, there's something I need to know. And suddenly, They're carrying him in a gold chariot or on a gold sedan chair out here to find this guy that mumbles something or scrapes something in the sand with his toe that looks like it looks like it says a wet bird doesn't fly in the spring. History is replete with that, and nobody laughs at it at the time. You may go, well, I don't believe it, or it's symbolic or metaphorical. It's still going on. Religions are still feeding that information. The whole idea of there being some kind of external information that will be personified in one person somewhere. Who is that one person? Think about it for a second. I've already told you, but think about it. It's in your own system. If you'd ever had a desire, wish you could meet a superior creature, a guru in the full sense of the word. Does anybody imagine that if you went and you traveled to outer Mongolia or wherever that you think it is now, and you went up in this cave, because I'm really having to stretch this and tear off reality, and you went up and you climbed up to the cave and you looked in, and inside the cave it looks like the inside of the Playboy Mansion, and the guru is wearing Gucci suits, he's got fax machines, and he's on the telephone. No! It's always the idea, it's a naive savage, because it's the past. It is stability. It is that which is simpler than you are. That's what life makes individuals do in their lifetime. That's the information that it holds out. Another little piece. I guess I should have or could have spent hours on this, but I already brought it up about incompetence. It's also part of ordinary intelligence. The simplistic loop cannot distinguish between radically new information and that which is simply different information. That is, alterations, variations of currently available information. Let me repeat again since I'm here. This is supremely more complex than what I'm saying. Because it's not simply it can't distinguish, it can't use it, which is the same thing, but I want you to understand it's not simply that the human intelligence is such that now there's all kinds of great information floating around, or some people have it hidden away in a locker and they keep trying to show it and nobody's smart enough to catch on. They can't distinguish because they can't use it. They can't use it because they can't distinguish. They can't do either one because life does not need ordinary intelligence to have any more complexity to it than there is now. But the hunger for it has never abated. That's part of life's growth process, is that people still hunger for it. All right, another aspect I wanted to point out about that is the manifestation of that ends up, it's a kind of dynamic, or it could be another motto for humanity. Well, let me just call it a dynamic. That is, the inability to, because I just thought of a better version of the motto, we don't write tape. So those of you who love mottos, hold on. Let's look at it as a dynamic. The inability of old linear intelligence to actually distinguish / use, be able to use radical information as opposed to simply variation of information. This causes men to accept, nay, now let me redo that, causes men to accept, nay, to insist oftentimes on what? Incompetence. It's certainly not called that, and this is not social criticism, and it's certainly not the big I word. It's not irony. I know, I hate to say that and offend some people, but it's not the I word. Incompetence, and I use as a fleeting example, our last taping was running out, is insisting that I will only take sexual advice from someone who is celibate. I'll only take marriage counseling from a priest, from an unmarried priest. I will only take weight loss classes from someone who's overweight, or someone that I found out had liposuction, that couldn't lose it themselves. Nobody cares. They find out, but so what? I will only take a motivational course in success by a guy who's presently in his third spate of bankruptcy. The man who now has his own chapter in legal textbooks. I will only accept sophisticated directions from a more simplistic, naive savage. That's what I insist on. Which is synonymous with men oftentimes will insist, not just accept, but they will just insist on incompetence. Now, use of the word of incompetence, of course, is ad hoc. It has no life term to it. It has no long-range effect because it is simply from one view of this kind of staggering, this kind of three-legged stool moving in a particular direction. At any given time, if your feeling of that which is meaningful is on one of the legs that's partially off the ground or it's tilted this way, then you see what's going on as being incompetence. That the people involved, and if you had a wider range, if I said, you mean life, you might go, all right, life, doesn't presently know what it's doing. We have anomalous information inside the system. It is running, at least temporarily, amok. No such luck. I was leading all this little paragraph, as small as it is, up to a point. For tonight, I could call it the ultimate insistence upon incompetence. To give another living example of a loop, just in the last hour or so. For tonight, tonight's ultimate example of insisting on incompetence. Better than sexual advice from a priest. Better than complex directions from a naive savage. The ultimate for the night of insisting on incompetence, and that is, I will give supreme credence to my inner voice, which is not mine. I find that, at least for the night. I said it was just a nightly example of an ultimate example. Well, I hear what you're saying, but I'm not so sure I can go along with that totally. And if I were so silly to say, well, why do you say that? I'll say, well, I don't think. I mean, if you want to discuss it now, I can see several variations that would lead. That is, people wouldn't say this. I choose to give greater weight, supreme weight, very likely, to my inner voice. And of course, the part they can add is what I start out tonight's tape. I choose, I will, I must give supreme validity, the greater weight, the supreme weight, to my own inner voice, my own thoughts, my own knowledge, my own inner voice. Parentheses, which is not mine, but it almost makes you want to say, well, let's hold hands and pray. Not enough to do it, it was just a joke. Pray for our own little brains. Well, I guess since I completed one little loop, we can stop there. If you want a little ending place is some of what I've talked about, especially the last 2 or 3 nights, and used as examples, is to look for your own. I get the distinct impression that many of you do this without me encouraging you, but to look at the examples there. Of course, I've always spilled the beans, if you were listening when they went splat, is if you subtract man from my first example when I was talking at the beginning of the tape, and you look around and just for the time being take out man and look at everything else, you can see that men fear that whatever the other system, idea, thing, process, organization, is fragile enough that we can do damage to it to the point of destroying it, or at least to render it inoperable. And I just point out examples, but I've already, as I said, I spilled the beans, but if you want to look specifically, everything. Love of one's family, children, that things must be held sacred, certain rituals must be held sacred, certain ideas. Why? And forget the idea about gods and that. It is chemically that the nervous system is such that if whatever the system is too simplistic, it cannot absorb what would appear to be a kind of negative input, anomalous information, resistance, criticism, serious inquiry, which all real inquiry is serious if you know how to do it. It makes criticism and assault look like kindergarten games, like jump the crack and break your brains back. Or look, if you want something else to look at, is the last thing I was pointing at, is there is a way, without any sort of sarcasm, no irony, but you can see that humanity continually, individually, and on what appears to be large scales historically, they will insist on incompetence, which gives rise to people making reputations for themselves as smart aleck social critics, satirists throughout history, of laughing. The humanity apparently, or this group, started out saying we want to do one thing, and of course they had, I wasn't that interested, but I can look at it right now and say, well, if that's what they wanted to do, they should have gone over here and dealt with this group or pursued that ideal on these lines. And what did those dumb mothers do? They turned around and did so-and-so. Ha, ha, ha. Plus I can do a caricature of them and maybe get published in the New Yorker and laugh at them. They were insisting on incompetence. The satirist is insisting on incompetence or he wouldn't be in that business. How incompetent can one be? To laugh at other people's incompetence. You're hired, sir. You're hired. You'll be our critic. As always, I am pleased in these final seconds to be able to announce that I see no possible individual ramifications of anything I've said. I cannot see in any manner that any of... No, I can't see that anything I have said tonight has any possible pertinence to anyone individually. I'm glad that I've been able to bring you this news again, and I've succeeded in being able to speak of that now, which is just totally irrelevant. I mean, I know some of it's interesting, but as far as it having any personal potential significance, I feel free as a bird, again, that I have escaped the possibility of entrapping you in such. I believe the technical word is fall to Roy. So, if anybody sees Roy, tell him good night.